Years ago, a massive meteor struck Earth, plunging the planet into endless darkness. Sunlight had become nothing more than a myth, and within the blink of an eye, everything was covered in a shroud of darkness, forcing all life to move underground. The darkness had blinded humanity, but it had not conquered everyone. One of the colossal underground cities, Shadow City, stood as a stark testament to humanity's struggle for survival. This settlement was a labyrinth of deep mining shafts and complex tunnels, a place where even light struggled to reach. The people of Shadow City had long since given up hope of ever seeing the sun again. However, Landon was one of the rare individuals who refused to accept this fate. He carried within him a deep desire to explore the outside world and was prepared to defy death itself. One evening, Landon met with his friends Kalen and Ivy in the shadowy corners of the underground city, ready for the dangerous journey they had planned. Landon's heart raced with excitement, but his face was resolute. He pulled out an old worn map from his pocket and whispered, "This is the only way out of Shadow City." "We're going to leave and never come back," Landon said. Ivy glanced at the map with a hint of apprehension. "No one knows where this tunnel ends. If there's an exit, why hasn't anyone found it by now?" she asked. Landon took a deep breath and looked into Ivy's eyes. "Because they were afraid. We won't be. I know there's something beyond this darkness. It's something I can feel," he said. Hope and determination shone in his eyes. Kalen was more cautious. As always, he was the strategist of the group. "All right, let's say we get outside. If it's truly a wasteland, what then?" he asked, while checking the knife strapped to his belt. Landon understood his friend's concerns, but had no intention of wavering in his resolve. "Whatever we have to face to survive, we will. We all need to believe in something," he said. Their plan seemed simple, but it was fraught with difficulties. The tunnel they would use to leave Shadow City was an ancient, labyrinthine passage abandoned by miners long ago. No one had entered this tunnel for a long time. No one had seen the last people who ventured in. Yet this did not deter Landon and his friends. "Are you ready?" Landon asked, his voice echoing in the darkness. Kalen gave a faint smile. "If I said I was ready, I'd be lying. But that's part of the deal, right?" he said. Ivy adjusted her backpack and said, "Without fear, courage means nothing." There was a brave glint in her eyes. After a brief preparation, Landon led the way, with Ivy and Kalen following. The tunnel was cold and damp, with echoes resonating from the depths with every step. As they progressed in silence, each of them wrestled with their own fears. Ivy was troubled by the thought of never returning. Kalen pondered how deep the tunnel extended. Landon's sole focus was on one thing: the truth. Was the world outside just a myth? Or was there another life waiting for them? After hours of walking, the tunnel began to widen. The darkness grew denser, more suffocating. Ivy ran her hand along the wall in the dark and asked, "How much farther do you think we have to go?" Landon paused and, without turning around, spoke, "We'll be outside soon. Just hang in there," he said. Even his voice seemed more strained under the weight of the darkness. A flickering light appeared at the end of the tunnel. The light was pale, as if it had been burning for centuries, but it was nonetheless hopeful. Ivy held her breath. "Landon, what is that?" she whispered. Landon squinted ahead as he replied, "I don't know, but we need to find out," he said. As they approached, they saw the light reflecting off a massive metal door. It was covered with ancient inscriptions and symbols. Ivy's hand trembled as she touched the door. "Where do we go from here?" Ivy asked, her voice shaking. Landon took a deep breath and tried to decipher the old code on the door. "This is a gateway. It might be the last door to the outside. Are you ready?" Landon asked. Kalen fixed his eyes on Landon, gripping his knife tightly, and answered calmly, "Whatever comes, we're ready," he said. As Landon began to open the door, its creaks filled the tunnel. The door slowly creaked open, revealing an unknown world before them. The darkness was everywhere, but it was not an end, it was a new beginning. The cold air that rushed in hinted that the outside world might still be dangerous, but the curiosity and excitement within them outweighed their fear. Landon took a deep breath. "Here we go," he said, and took a step forward. They ventured into the darkness beyond. As Landon, Ivy, and Kalen stepped through the door, they began to face the harsh reality of the outside world. The dark gray fog that enveloped them was like a wall. The land stretched out endlessly, somber, cold, and eerie. There were no signs of life. In the absence of the sun, plants had withered and died, and animals had deserted the area. But this unknown did nothing to dampen Landon's hope. The excitement of stepping out of Shadow City into the real world was overwhelming. "Is this real?" Ivy whispered, squinting into the distance, but seeing nothing. Only darkness prevailed. Kalen was silent. Suppressing all his emotions, he surveyed the surroundings, always on edge. He tightened his grip on his sword. "The outside doesn't look very welcoming," he said in a harsh tone. Landon walked forward with determination. "Don't be afraid. This is just the beginning. It may be abandoned, but that doesn't mean it's the end of everything," he said. The group began to advance slowly, each step carefully chosen. It felt as though they were facing ghosts from the past with every step. They didn't know what had happened on this land years ago, but the remnants of abandoned cities reminded them that once, a great civilization had existed here. Decaying buildings, toppled poles, and broken roads showcased how quickly everything had vanished. After a while, Ivy took a deep breath and broke the silence. "We're searching for signs of life here, but maybe no one is left." "Where did everyone go?" she said, her voice tinged with worry and distraction. Landon paused and looked back at Ivy. "They might have hidden underground like us. Or maybe they really have all vanished. But that means we have even more reason to find out the truth," he said, his voice filled with determination and hope. At that moment, Kalen raised his hand, signaling for silence. "I heard something," he whispered. Everyone froze. Landon and Ivy held their breath, listening intently. From a distance, there was a faint rustling carried by the wind. But it wasn't just the wind. Something, or someone, was watching them. Landon stared into the darkness. "Is something there?" he asked, though it was clear he sensed danger. Kalen drew his sword and began to scan the area. "Yes, something is there." "Be quiet," he said. He had to keep his emotions in check, but he could feel the adrenaline. Suddenly, a loud noise erupted from a distance. Something was moving amidst the debris of a collapsed building. Kalen quickly grabbed Landon's arm and pulled them behind a rock. "Hide!" he shouted. As they hid, their hearts racing uncontrollably, a massive creature emerged from the wreckage. The shadowy silhouette in the mist seemed like an old technological relic. Covered in metal armor, its giant feet shook the ground. It could have been a war machine once used by humanity, but now it was feral. "What is that?" Ivy whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "It must be an old patrol robot, but it seems to have lost its functionality." "It's gone into a destruction program," Landon said. Kalen replied without taking his eyes off the machine. "If it finds us, it will destroy us. We need to get out of here immediately," he said. Landon quickly scanned the area. "We can take refuge in that ruined building," he said, pointing to a nearby structure. "We need to get past it." As the robot's colossal footsteps grew nearer, the group sprinted towards the ruins. The darkness and fog offered some protection, but it was only a matter of time before the creature spotted them. Ivy looked back and saw the robot's red lights blinking. "It noticed us," she shouted in panic. "Run!" Landon yelled. The group dashed toward the building's remains. The robot followed with heavy steps, each footfall shaking the ground and producing a metallic rumble. Once inside the ruins, Landon was out of breath. "Escaping from something this big is no easy feat," he said, wiping the sweat from his brow. Kalen, gripping his sword tightly, scanned the surroundings. "If it decides to come in here, we'll have no place to run," he said. Ivy, trying to catch her breath, joined them. "We need to survive this. If we wait any longer, that thing will tear us apart," she said. Just then, the robot's heavy steps slowed. It seemed to have lost them, standing still for a moment before moving in a different direction. The group took a deep breath, but they knew the danger wasn't over. Landon listened quietly for a while before whispering, "Did it go away?" Kalen nodded. "For now. But staying here is dangerous," he said. Landon looked around the dark building thoughtfully. "There's something here. This world isn't just abandoned. It's also dangerous. But we need to find the answers. Creatures and machines won't stop us." Ivy took a deep breath. What if there's more? What if this is just the beginning? She said. Landon looked at Ivy and answered with determination. We'll find out. No matter what, we will continue, he said. In this dark world, unknown dangers awaited them. But Landon's hope was strong enough to resist the fear. Landon, Ivy, and Kalen moved cautiously through the abandoned building, their steps echoing on the metallic floor. They were on high alert, aware that the patrolling robot might return at any moment. The outside world wasn't just dark. Everything and everyone that survived seemed to have become part of that darkness. Yet Landon's determination drove them to face these dangers. What do you think this place used to be? Ivy asked, examining the dust-covered walls. A base. A shelter. Landon bent over an old monitor and wiped away the dust with his fingers. It must have been a research center. The technology is very old, but there are still traces. We might find clues about what happened here. Kalen, holding his sword and scanning the area, said, Whatever it was, we need to stay alert. We might not be alone. At that moment, a faint murmur reached their ears, as if something was moving far away. Landon and Ivy noticed it too. Is someone there? Landon called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. They received no reply, but something seemed to be moving deep within the building. The group continued forward silently. As they passed through the dark corridors, they noticed signs of a past conflict within the building. Bullet marks scarred the walls, and broken robot parts littered the floor. Ivy examined a chest plate lying on the ground. There was a battle here, she whispered. It's clear that people fought hard to survive, Landon added. But it seems they didn't win. Suddenly, the building shook with an explosion from below. Something was moving rapidly beneath them. Landon shut his eyes tightly, calculating the situation, while Kalen shouted, Get down! The floor is collapsing. The floor cracked loudly, and the group found themselves falling into the building's lower levels. Everything happened quickly. Dust, debris, and metal fragments scattered around. Ivy barely managed to hold onto a metal beam and looked up, gasping for air. Kalen immediately rushed to help Landon. Are you okay? Ivy asked, her voice trembling but strong. Landon got up, dusting himself off. I'm fine, I think. But this place is far from safe. From below, a faint scratching sound was heard. It seemed like something, or someone, was approaching them. They all took a deep breath and readied their swords. Ivy turned to Landon and said in a low voice, Is that sound coming from a living creature? Landon frowned. We don't know yet, but we'll find out. Be prepared. The sounds grew closer, and something began moving in the shadows between the walls. Ivy held her breath, and Kalen gripped his sword tighter. Suddenly, figures emerged from the darkness, part human, part machine. These beings were clad in rusted armor and covered in half-broken metal parts, their eyes glowing red. Mutants, Ivy whispered. The legends were true. They're no longer human, Kalen said coolly. And they don't look friendly. Landon stepped forward and addressed the mutant leader. Who are you? Do you know what this place is? He asked, but the mutant leader did not respond. Instead, with a metallic growl, they drew their weapons. This is not a good sign, Ivy said, stepping back. Landon quickly drew his sword. Looks like a fight is unavoidable. Get ready. The mutants attacked swiftly, charging with their rusty metal weapons. Landon deflected their strikes with quick moves. As his sword struck a mutant's damaged armor, a metallic screech echoed. Ivy tried to fend off the attacking mutants with agile archery. Kalen demonstrated his warrior skills by taking down 2 mutants at once. We won't surrender without a fight, Landon shouted as he advanced toward the mutant leader. The mutant leader deftly deflected Landon's attack and countered. As the battle intensified, the old machines around the building began to activate. The old monitors flickered, and red lights started blinking. The systems were coming back online. Suddenly, Ivy noticed some writings on the walls. Landon, there's something here. This wasn't a research facility. It was a weapons production center. Humans created these mutants as a last resort. Landon, fending off the mutant leader, turned to Ivy. What? How could this be? They made them to protect against external threats. But things went wrong. Now they hunt humans. Ivy shouted, her eyes filled with fear. Landon dealt a final blow to the mutant leader, bringing it down. "This is why we're here. We need to confront the realities of this dark world," he said, out of breath. "And it's our job to stop these creatures." Kalen, after taking down the last mutant, took a deep breath and approached Landon. "This place is much more dangerous. But we can't stop until we find the answers," he said firmly. Landon looked at the fallen mutant leader. "These creatures won't stop us. There are more secrets to uncover. We need to find a light in this darkness." Ivy, still examining the glowing writings on the wall, said, "Maybe there's hope in this world. But to find that hope, we'll need to fight even harder." The group decided to leave the building and venture deeper. Greater dangers might await them outside, but Landon and his team were determined to face every challenge to restore humanity's lost hope. As Landon, Ivy, and Kalen approached the exit of the abandoned building, a new challenge lay before them. Below, they discovered an immense underground complex, covered by an artificial dome that resembled the sky. Massive machines, glowing with energy, pierced through the darkness. In the center of the plaza stood a colossal energy source, radiating light. "What is this?" Ivy whispered, her eyes widening. "This place. It's incredible." Landon approached the shimmering energy source. "This must be the heart of our dark world. They're drawing all the energy from here," he said. "Perhaps we can find something here to end this darkness." Kalen suddenly stopped, scrutinizing the surroundings. "Wait," he said in a stern voice. "We're not alone." At that moment, from the shadows emerged a much larger and more formidable group of mutants than before. These mutants were more advanced and deadly. At their center stood a gigantic leader, with bright red eyes and mechanical limbs that gleamed like deadly weapons. Landon gripped his sword tightly. "It looks like this will be our final battle," he said. The mutant leader spoke in a broken voice. "Humans, this land is ours now. Darkness is our ally, and you are merely prey." Ivy looked at the mutant leader with fear in her eyes. "Do we have any chance against them?" "Even if we don't have a chance, we have to try," Landon said resolutely. "This could be humanity's salvation." The mutant leader took a massive step toward the group. "Humans are weak. You cannot escape the darkness," he declared. Kalen drew his sword and glanced at Landon. "Let's make a plan before we attack. If we're not careful, we won't make it out alive." Landon quickly assessed the area. Beneath the energy source was a large mechanism. "We need to reach that source," he said. "It might disrupt the dark system and buy us some time." Ivy turned to Kalen and said, "I'll get to the source. I can protect you." "All right," Landon agreed, "but be careful. You need to activate the source while we distract the mutants." The group moved swiftly. Landon and Kalen charged at the mutant leader. Sparks flew as their swords clashed with the mechanical limbs. Ivy took advantage of the chaos to make her way to the energy source. The mutant leader aimed a colossal punch at Landon, who dodged quickly and struck the leader's mechanical arm with a deep blow. Meanwhile, Kalen fought fiercely, taking down the mutants one by one. When Ivy reached the energy source, she struggled to understand how it worked. It's so complex," she said to herself. "But I can do this." She rapidly pressed buttons on the machine. The energy source trembled, and the lights grew even brighter. At that moment, the mutant leader delivered a massive blow to Landon. Landon tried to block it with his sword, but the force sent him flying several meters back. Ivy turned around to see Landon lying on the ground. "Landon!" she shouted. Kalen seized the opportunity to strike the mutant leader. "Now!" he yelled. Landon, in pain, got up and made a final assault on the mutant leader. His sword plunged into the leader's chest. With a mechanical scream, the leader collapsed. Ivy pressed the final button, activating the energy source. Suddenly, all the systems powered up. A blast echoed through the dark complex. The machines covering the dome shook, and the lights flared, illuminating the entire area. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the colossal energy source exploded, bathing the area in a brilliant light. The darkness began to recede. The artificial dome that had covered the sky collapsed, and sunlight, which had not touched this underground world for a long time, began to shine down. As Ivy, Kaylin, and Landon looked at each other. They held their breath in silence. Ivy closed her eyes and felt the sunlight on her face. "We did it," she whispered. Landon walked heavily towards Ivy. "This is just the beginning," he said. "But yes, we did it." Kaylin planted his sword into the ground and looked up at the sky with a smile. "We will no longer live in darkness." As the sunlight illuminated every dark corner of the earth, humanity's hope began to rekindle. The light emerging from the ruins of Shadow City became a symbol of the future. People were ready to return to the surface and leave the darkness behind. Landon, Ivy, and Kaylin would be remembered as the heroes who brought light to the darkness. But this story was far from over. For even though they had won the real battle, greater dangers still awaited the world. I hope you had a good time. If you liked my story, do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye. See you in the next story.